going on, YouTube? It's a real Spiel, the midday edition. Instagram. It's the midday edition of the real Spiel. Back with Dell here, Brereton. Your host, your storyteller, your influencer, that man you might love to hate, but I don't miss. Alexa, stop the music. Today, the reason I'm doing a little bit early today is because really I wanted to be in front of some of the things that we're hearing in the news about this shooter in Texas. I want to have a discussion about really what makes a teenage boy, he's really a boy. I know we want to make him into a man, but he's really a boy. And what makes him do what he does. And we're going to have a big show. I want you to think about it. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to get yourself organized, invite some people in. I'm going to wait for some people to pop into the live, and we're going to start having that discussion. It's a real Spiel. Alexa, resume the music. I'll be right back. Hey everybody, Mojack70, good to see you. Yes, I'm going to start early. I know a lot of people might not be getting here, but I'm going to share it and go from there and see if we can have our conversation. Might wait for a few of you guys to get in here. If you're on YouTube, please share, subscribe. It's always nice to see those subscribers go up. Looking to have 500 subscribers at least by the end of next month on YouTube. YouTube's my newer platform, so I'm not trying to be over optimistic. Okay, Alexa, stop the music. For those that are going to come in, the live happened early, and it happened because I wanted to, again, be in front of some of the things that are happening in the news. This is a real Spiel. I call it your midday mix. It's going to replace the 8 o'clock show on the midday mix days, and I'll do some midday mix, and I'll do some 8 o'clock shows just to keep things mixed up for various different audiences and people that come on at different times throughout the day. So our conversation today is essentially about why do these young men and young boys, really they're young boys, why are they being radicalized to the point that they're going into these schools, they're going into the top supermarket. We've had something here, I'm in Toronto, Ontario, for those who don't know, Canada. We've had similar scenarios, and it seemed here this year, actually, a young boy went into a high school. He was in grade 9, he was actually 14 years old, with a gun. He was looking for another kid, shot him, and left. So what we have here is we have an instance where there's a lot of blame going out. What is these young boys? Really, they're young boys, and I have 3 sons, so an 18-year-old is a boy, and I know we've given them legal capacity to do some things. They can drive a car, they can vote, they can in some places they can drink alcohol, in some places they got to wait, but essentially they're a boy, and what's radicalizing our young boys and pushing them to the place where they have now become active shooters in various vicinities. Now, a lot of us from the Black community say, well, this is not something that takes place in the Black community. And I'm going to beg to differ with you. And I'm going to show you some statistics in a minute. The active shooter mentality in the Black community is just different. It's the same, but it's just different. And so I believe that this is an epidemic. It's not mental illness. I'm going to say very clearly, this is not mental illness. And, I don't even like to call out her name because I just think the woman is it's stupid. And I don't like to give her any airtime, but Candace Owens, quickly ran to her soapbox and began a ridiculous argument about telling us that because the boy was a cross-dresser, he was mentally ill, and we have to start addressing the mental illness amongst us. And so her mindset basically, and her base, of course, wants her to hit the LGBTQ community as much as possible. And so therefore she's now shifting the argument to saying his mental illness was in respect to his sexual proclivities, his sexual orientation, his sexual leanings, and the fact he's a cross-dresser. That's why he's crazy, and that's why he shot people. Like, that argument doesn't even make sense. I don't know why she even bothered. But at the end of the day, I'm not calling these guys crazy. These guys know what they're doing. These guys have been radicalized to the point where they are aware and they are cognizant of what they're doing. Mental illness, would not have 18-year-old boys consistently going to places where there are no other individuals with weapons. And if you're crazy, if this is just crazy, they might walk into a police station. They might walk into an Army Reserve area. They might, they're going to find all kinds of places to become active shooters, but they're not. They're becoming active shooters in the midst of people who are helpless, and that's not crazy. So these kids aren't crazy, and I'm going to put it out early. The issue, this is a manhood issue. This is a manhood issue, and so my title has been, "What do real men do in the face of danger?" And as a subtitle, how have men been either responsible or the absence of men being responsible for these young boys that are being radicalized early? Okay, so I put some things together, as I always do, because I like to come from a place of research. I like to come from a place of statistics, so I can back up my opinions. And absolutely, there's a lot of opinion in here, but my opinion, I believe, is based on things that I've been looking up. And so we see this generation, it's very different. Okay, the males are aging slower. Their maturity is what I'm talking about, while the girls are aging faster. Have you noticed that? I've never seen a generation of young women so interested in older men 20, even 30 years older than them, but they don't have any interest in the young boys their age. They don't have interest in the boys their age, but they have interest in men 10, 20, 30 years older. We see at this point in time, young ladies are being sexualized quicker. Young women, the young girls are being sexualized quicker. They're being pushed to the forefront of becoming women much, much faster. I mean, just the fashion industry alone, you have young girls now from the ages of 7 and up. They want to have lipstick. They want to have nail polish. They want to have, eyelashes, makeup. So the sexualization of young girls is actually happening much quicker. And I think that's because of social media. And there's a lot of other factors too, but that's not my topic tonight, but I just have to balance it. But we see that our young men, they're not maturing faster. And I'm gonna show you some statistics in a minute, but they're not. Like, anybody who has a teenage boy who's over the age, and they're over the age of 40, and they have a teenage boy, and they look back at how they were at the time their son was a teenager, most of us will say, I was way more developed than him. I was way more advanced than him. I was way more interested in girls earlier. I was way more interested in being grown up earlier. I was thinking of moving out on my own earlier, where we see that, it's not uncommon for a 30-year-old man to still be at home with his mom. It's not an uncommon thing based on how they've matured now. And I'm talking about, our generation Z's and X's that, I got that right? Yes. No, the millennials and the generation Z's. I'm generation X. So generation Z, generation, and the millennials, we see that group hasn't left the nest. Talking specifically of the men, a lot of them have not left the nest. Now, this is something that I found to be crazy too, when I say that the active shooter mentality in all of these ethnic communities, racialized and well, I don't even know why they say racialized community. Every community is racialized. If it's a white community, it's still racialized. But all of these communities still have components of active shooters. Now, I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is my thought process, right? Both young people, male and female, in this generation are actually they're having sex younger, right? They are politically oriented, mindful, younger. Okay. And this is the stat that blew my brain too. They're also having babies out of wedlock younger and at an incredible rate when it comes to certain communities. So I just want to show you guys something. In the United States alone, and I use the United States, and for those who live in Canada and they say, like, why does he keep using the United States? Because when you want to draw from a large pool of individuals who correlate in multiple ethnic ways, you have a better baseline of data when you're using a large pool. We have 400, 350, 400, whatever the number is, million people to the south of us in Canada. The Black community in Canada is not representative of the same level of development and mass that they have in America. So when I'm using statistics, a lot of times I use American statistics because they show better for giving us actual data, right? So in the United States, for example, significant differences in and out of wedlock births exist. And this is interesting. I'd like you guys to check this out, right? And this is from 2014, and this is a study from Yale, a Yale study in the Yale EDU. So if you want to look it up, who's the study from? You know, people who check, people always be checking people's information. This is where I got this information from. So, the national standard for children out of wedlock, right, is about 40%. It essentially means that of all the people who give birth, women who give birth, of course, right, 40% of those women, now this is nationally, are giving birth out of wedlock. But when you break the statistics down and target in America, the larger ethnic groups, there's some things that come to light that I'd like to show you. So when you look at white communities, remember the national average is 40%, but white communities actually only have 29% babies out of wedlock. And I'm coming back to them in a minute because I think there's a reason that a lot of these kids who are the active shooters are actually white kids. And I'll talk about that in a minute. The Hispanics, 53%. That means more than half of every baby born in America from a Hispanic woman, she has done it by herself. She has done it without a husband. I'll put it that way. She didn't do it by herself, but she did it without a husband. She wasn't married. And then the staggering statistic is that of the Black community, 71% of Black women are having babies out of wedlock. 7 out of 10 women are deciding, because nowadays you can decide that, to have a child not married to the father. And so let's start breaking that down and focusing on just the boys, because this conversation is just the boys. And I'm sure if I put my head to figuring out the girls, I could give you a scenario with that too, right? So if you got, and I'll do it quickly if you want it for girls, 7 out of 10 Black women have children out of wedlock. And if they're having girls, those girls are being raised looking around saying, there's no father in my family, nuclear family, environmental conversation in my upbringing. Therefore, is he necessary? Do I actually have to have one since I am being raised without one? Maybe I don't have to have one. So that's a generational thing potentially being passed on to women. Not my discussion tonight. But today, about the boys, that means 7 out of 10 women who are having boys are raising those boys with no man who is his biological father, either present or extremely active or married to, because we can break it down. They could be having them out of wedlock and still be common law. They could be having them out of wedlock and be boyfriend. They could be having them out of wedlock and the man is still active. But predominantly 71% of them are having these boys that have no father figure in the household, no father figure to rear them up, to teach them things that only men can teach men, young men. So how does that affect Black boys? And this is where I'm going with this, and I'm breaking it all the way down to get to our active shooter here in Texas. This guy was Hispanic, right? So we have now a bunch of young Black boys, young Black men that are being raised in a maternal structure. And the only paternal environment they get normally is either siblings in the home or friends, family potentially, or schoolmates or teachers outside the home. So within their nuclear family, there is no natural respect being built by men for men. And so now what you have is you have a group of young men who are existing in a post-colonial world, in a system and structure that essentially has disenfranchised some of them. But I won't even talk about the disenfranchised. That's easy. It's easy to talk about at-risk youth. It's easy to talk about disenfranchised hegemony. It's easy to talk about glass ceilings and lack of access. We've been talking about that for years. But let me hit you with something else. You know, not only are they disenfranchised, but they're also being cultured. And I'll use the word I'm going to use for white kids and Hispanic kids. They're being radicalized. But what are Black men radicalized to do? Black men in America are being radicalized to hate Black men. It's the music. It's our music. It's our hip hop culture. They're being radicalized to hate themselves. They're being radicalized to hate potentially even the women that they've come from and the women that are in their family. But let's keep it in the man conversation tonight. They've been radicalized to hate other men. And when you've been radicalized to hate other men, what is the result? And the biggest, I would say, criticism that takes place in America is the Black on Black crime conversation. That, of course, many of us from a Democratic position say, oh, that's not the first conversation you need to have, because there's a whole bunch of other things, all the things I mentioned that we've already discussed and we will continue to discuss. But I'm saying, how are men being radicalized? I'm telling you, we're being radicalized in every ethnicity, but we're doing it different. And so Black men are being radicalized to kill each other. They're being radicalized to hate each other, to fight over a woman, to fight over a corner, to fight over money, to fight over respect. So the radicalization of our young men, look how it's taking place in homes where 71% of them are being raised without a father. In homes where generation X, my generation, when did we lose our virginity? The average age of, again, another Yale study, the average age of when Generation X, my generation, born from the 60s to the 80s, they lost their virginity at 18.6 years of age, right? Generations, the millennials, they lost their virginity at around 17 years of age. Now, Generation Z, the generation that's going out there and blowing up stuff and shooting up stuff and running up to Buffalo to kill people in an A&P, going to Texas and shooting little kids and killing teachers. That generation is losing their virginity at 16. Now, look at this weirdness. And I'm talking for the men. We have a very underdeveloped male who's losing his virginity at a very young age. So he's having sex younger than his father and his grandfather is having sex. He's having sex much earlier. He's having sex with women of his age. Most of that statistic, it's the same age for women as it is for men, which means it's not younger girls having sex with older men. Even though they want them more than they want that boy, it is the same age. It's 16-year-olds having sex with 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds having sex with 17-year-olds, and in my generation, 18 and 18. They're comparable. So it means that those young people are sleeping with each other, but they're sleeping with each other in the case of the Generation Z, if you're American Z, if you're Canadian Z, where they're sleeping with each other for the boys at a much younger age. And they are much younger in their mentality. So they're not very mature. They're not very mature at all. And then this other statistic, 71% of all these births are taking place where there's no father present. So now what is Generation Z giving us? This is what we got to be looking at. This current generation is going to make people grandfathers sooner. They're going to be producing children sooner. They're going to be producing children with men who are not even men. They are not developed. They do not have the capacity to be responsible. Okay? They're being radicalized by culture. And they have, if they're Black, they're being stigmatized by environment. So they have less resources, less understanding, education, less maturity, and they're producing children at a ridiculous whopping amount, leaving the women without a male figure in the house. And even if there was a male figure in the house, he's an underdeveloped male anyway. That's the Black community. Radicalized, and the only thing the music and the culture is telling them to do, go kill each other. Whew. That thing is crazy when you look at it like that. You move over to the Hispanics, 53%, that's half, a little bit more than half, again, are being radicalized. We see it today. This young man, he went in there, killed his grandmother. We don't know if he killed her for sure. They're saying that he shot his grandmother. Then he left the house and decided to go shoot up an elementary school. This is the allegation that he was teased. So what? That he was teased because he was poor. I saw the picture. He's taking a picture with an iPhone 13 talking about he's poor. Like, come on, man. Like, we got to stop giving these young people excuses. Don't call them crazy. He's not crazy. He knows what he's doing. Don't say he's got mental. He doesn't have mental illness. Don't say he was picked on. He was bullied. No, don't say that either. And guess what? Don't even say it's because we need to have gun control, because it's not about gun control. I'm telling you, it's about men control. It's about men raising men. It's about men being present, mature individuals rearing up mature individuals. It's not about gun control. It's about man control. That's what it's about. It's not gun control. A gun can't do nothing sitting on a counter. It's a tool. It's like a hammer. Well, if we had less guns, you're not going to have less guns. You're not going to have it. Stop this dumb conversation. You're not going to have less guns. Guns are not going anywhere. Guns can't shoot anybody unless you're holding it and pulling a trigger. That's not the problem. The problem isn't less guns. The problem is that there's less men raising men. That's the problem. That's the problem. These kids are getting radicalized, looking at information and being radicalized without guidance, reading stuff, ingesting stuff, being radicalized without counsel, without the surrounding support structure of strong male, mature interaction in their life. And I'm telling you, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. They're getting younger. They're getting dumber. They're getting less mature. They're getting less education, but they're still having babies. So it's not getting better. And so you have now this Hispanic community that is dealing with all of the same stigmas that other communities are dealing with. But this is the issue with the Hispanic community. The Hispanic community sometimes doesn't know if it's white or Black, doesn't know what direction to turn, because the Hispanic community can grow up in a very Black environment, can grow up liking Black music, ingesting Black culture, and being part of the Black conversation more than it would ever could be part of the white conversation, but they very well could also be on the other side. So you have this hybrid in the Hispanics. You have a hybrid based on where they grew up, who is around them, based on parenting. What kind of scenario will they be? Will they lean to being Black, more Black? Will they lean to being more white? Or will they somehow try to identify a pure, authentic American Hispanic experience, which I don't know. I don't know anything about it. Somebody have to explain that to me, because I don't have information on that. My experience with most Hispanics in America, mostly Puerto Rican, some Dominican Republic individuals who've come over, Cuba, right? And that's about and Mexican. And those are the ethnicities that I have experienced in America, and I've experienced how their culture works. and how some of the scenarios take place when they get into organized crime and when they get into gangs and when they get radicalized. Again, some of those Hispanic cultures get radicalized against each other, where you have the Hispanic gangs, but you also have Bloods and Crips. You have Hispanics who belong to Bloods, you have Hispanics who belong to Crips, and you have Hispanics that belong to Hispanic gang affiliated organizations. So again, you have another type of radicalization, but it's not spreading out into high schools necessarily. It's not spreading out into elementary schools necessarily, but it's amongst their own community. And it's still radicalization. It's still a problem. It's still men not raising men, because who wants their boy to be raised in gang culture? Imagine that's the culture. And a lot of guys are trying to find out, saying, hey, man, my kid's out here doing crazy stuff. Let me go pull him back. It's too late, bro. You can't go get your kid out the gang after you've allowed your kid to get in gang. That's stuff they make movies about. Most of them, that's not going to work. That kid's not listening to you. If you've taken so long to reach him that now you got to come and unwind him out of a gang, bro, you waited too long. You waited far too long to get him out of that. And so this Hispanic young man is now in a position where he's trying to self-identify, and this is what the whole cross-dressing is about. He's lost. He doesn't have an identity. He doesn't know who he is, right? And again, I'm not gonna go in the direction of Candace Owens. I'm not going in her direction because, again, I don't think she knows what she's talking about 99% of the time. And there's some people that if you're on the same side as their argument, you got to check your argument and be like, man, no, even though what she's saying might make sense to me, it can't make sense because it's her. And you just listen to her argument. This kid, cross-dressing isn't what made him pick up a gun. He's not mentally ill. He knows exactly what he's doing. He went to kill people. He made up his mind to kill people. He knew where he was going, to kill people. He understood what he was doing. And he had a determination of purpose. Same with the kid in Buffalo. He knew exactly what he was doing. He's not crazy. He's not crazy. They said COVID-19 affected him. Let me get to him right now. The white community, 29% of white people are having children out of wedlock. So you might say, well, the blacks are at 71%, and the Hispanics are at 53%. We're only at 29%. Surely having men in the house is something that our ethnicity actually has. But what about the fringe few that don't? This is my position. The fringe few that don't, is this where the active shooters are coming from? Are the active shooters coming from the fringe few of little white boys who don't have what other little white boys have? They don't have daddy's money. They don't have the privilege and the nepotism. Are they those kids? Are they those kids who were left out, who don't have everything that the status quo has established for other members of their community? Are they those kids? Or are they the kids who actually do have that involved? And the fact that what's taking place is there's so much privilege that they're receiving, there's not enough discipline. There's so much access they're receiving, there's not enough saying no. There's not enough doors being closed on things of their behavior that you say, I'm going to stop this right now. I don't care. I don't care if he's my firstborn. He's doing cocaine in the house. He's doing this in the house. So each one of us, listen, I had my little sons I had to control at a certain time. I have a little one I got to deal with right now. And I'm telling you that it comes to the place where this is more about manhood. It's more about manhood than it ever could be about gun violence, that it ever could be about mental illness. That's not the conversation. The conversation's about manhood. They're getting younger, right? And this is another thing that you got to throw in there. These kids who are being underdeveloped in this generation, the development of these active shooter video games now. What are these young boys staying at home, lacking maturity doing? There's a lot of them they're online with active shooter video games. So you're getting radicalized. You're reading the manifesto of white supremacy. You're listening to hip hop that's telling you to kill your own, and every other word is the N word, nigga this and nigga that. and you are just seeing your brother as just another stepping stone of your future and of your upliftment, and you're like, you got to go through him to get it, and that's your mentality, and you've been radicalized through that. You've been radicalized in some Hispanic, gang culture where it's like you versus me, bro, and you this is a situation where we're fighting each other, and you're being radicalized through all that, but at the same time, you're sitting there playing an active shooter video game, getting comfortable with just shooting down, mowing down people, right? Again, who's playing those games my generation? We just got started in it. The millennials, absolutely, and Generation Z for sure. That's their thing, okay? That's their thing. And this is what also I'm going to put on the plate too. And I'm not staying here much longer. I'm almost done. This was never supposed to be that long. Entitlement. The entitlement of this generation, Generation Z and the millennials, and I'll even throw in Generation X, the end of those guys, the guys who were born, the young women and men who were born around the 80s and on, close to the 80s, 77s and on. Entitlement. You grew up watching that. You grew up experiencing that. You grew up seeing it. Entitlement, right? The Cosby Show generation in the Black community. Entitlement. That's the first generation. That's the first, I would say, era of affluent Black people on TV. Affluent Black people on TV. They wanted to see, the Fresh Prince, and they wanted to see the Cosby Show, and they said, "Oh my gosh, look, affluent Black people with privilege, Black people with entitlement. I want to be Hillary." You know what I'm saying? I want to be Lisa Bonet. I forgot her name in the show, in the Cosby Show. Entitlement. And so we have a lot of young kids now with some crazy entitlement. They truly believe that they're supposed to just live in their parents' house forever. They truly believe that we're just supposed to continue to do for them, and they're not supposed to do for themselves. And so you throw in entitlement with a young boy, radicalization. You threw in gang culture. You throw in video games. You throw in a less mature individual. And then the big one, no male role model in the house that is an actual DNA relative. Boy, you have the recipe for an active shooter. You have the recipe for it. It's not a gun. Guns have been there forever. Anyone can go and pick up a gun if that's the case. It's not a gun. The issue is not the gun. The issue is the boy holding the gun. The issue is the absence of the man in his life, because why is he holding this gun, deciding he's going to kill innocents? Innocents he's trying to kill. He's trying to kill innocents. And this is my conversation today. What is really going on with the presence of real male role models in these boys' life? My last point, and I'll go home on this point. This didn't happen by accident. Especially in the Black community and the Hispanic community. But I'll stay in the Black community and mind my business. This didn't happen by accident. This thing was passed down by courts that do not understand that their job is not to police Black families. These courts and these family responsibility organizations that now believe it is their job to administer and function as referees of Black families, this is the cause of it. And I'll tell you right now, where they have taken Black men, I'll speak specifically of us because I want to mind my own business right now. I'll stay right in my own kitchen. Where you have 71% of these women having babies out of wedlock. I don't know the figure. I didn't look it up. But I will say a majority of those women are now taking those brothers to court and trying to now police them financially and police their access to their child. And so now you have a scenario where a woman, and let's talk about entitlement, a woman who's 7 out of 10 of them having babies, with no daddy, but now their daddy is a judge. Their judge is the daddy. And daddy judge is going to tell you how many times you can see your child. And daddy judge is going to tell you how many times how much money you got to pay. And daddy judge is going to tell you that I'm running the show, that I have full custody, that I can do what I want, and I can change his name, and I can change his religion, and I can move when I want to move, and I can put him in this school, and I can tell you can't show up, and I can keep him from accessing you, and I can keep him from giving you a phone call, and I can call you a deadbeat, and I can do all these things. And women do this thinking that they're somehow penalizing the man who's got enough sperm to go out and have a bunch of kids and name all the babies the same name that they named your child. But you think you're penalizing the man, but the only person you're penalizing is that boy that you're raising, who has no access to a father, who is being radicalized, period. He's being radicalized, whether it's of his own community, whether he's being radicalized against a particular ethnic or ideology, race, a Muslim or a white supremacist, because remember before with Al Qaeda, a lot of those little white boys were Al Qaeda. You thought it was Arabs. It wasn't Arabs. It was like these little white kids who were being radicalized to be Muslim, and they were running over there. They were being Al Qaeda. You guys forgot about that. It wasn't a bunch of Arabs running around doing that. It was a bunch of white kids being radicalized to do that. And so, back to the Black community, these communities are now relying on court systems that don't care about your community. Do you think these judges care about your community? I have my own stories. They don't care. I went to court one time, and I still have, this is the son I'm talking about with myself. I had access. I had joint custody for 14 years. I had joint custody. I took the mother back to court to adjust the custody and adjust the payment because my pay had changed. She had denied me access for years. And the judge said, well, in that case, I'll just take your custody away. I said, you're going to take away my custody after I had custody for 14 years when I brought her to court to change this thing? And she hasn't given me access to my kid. You're telling me that you're taking the joint custody away? Man, listen, I'm not even lying to you. I'm not even lying to you. In that moment, it was only a sliver of self-control that didn't have me dive over the counter and kill that judge. I'm telling you, I don't know what saved his life. I was stone cold for about a minute and a half where they had to touch me and say, Mr. Brereton, are you going to talk? Because I was just saying, how fast could I get to this guy? I'm going to jail today. I was ready for him because in my head, and all I had the power to say was, you made my son a statistic. And I left that court. And I tell you what happened not too long later. His mother called me and said, you know what? I need help. I can't do it by myself. I need help. I'm taking you fully out of the court system. I need help with him. And to this day, we're still dealing with him. So I'm not speaking this theoretically. I'm speaking this from experience, and I'm looking some things up. These young men, these little boys who are calling men because they've killed people, and we want to give them, of course, the worst penalty we can give them. We're calling them men. They're little boys who don't have no fathers. And this is the last thing that I'll say after I deal with this court. I said that the court thing was the last thing. It's very interesting that not all of these little killers get killed by the police. Because I'll say this, you ain't going to like it. Some of you ain't going to like it at all. But these kids walk in, they're kids. They're 18-year-old kids. I'm not going to turn them into men because they're not. They're little boys. They're little boys. And they walk into school and they shoot and they kill. These little kids in Texas, you can't even recognize them now. You can't even identify their bodies. That's a damage this kid did to them. Imagine shooting a little child to the point where he or she cannot even be recognized. And I'll tell you right now, those cops in Texas, I don't know the circumstances, but the same thing should have happened in Buffalo. Those kids should never get to handcuffs. You 18 years old, you walk in there with a weapon of ready to kill somebody in a war, and you shoot little kids. You should never make it to handcuffs. That boy in Buffalo should never have made it into handcuffs. Because I'll tell you right now, if it was a little black kid, he's not going to make it into handcuffs. That little Mexican kid, that little Hispanic kid, I don't know if he's Mexican or what, he didn't make it into handcuffs. But I wonder I wonder how that little kid, that little white boy in Buffalo made it into handcuffs. I'm quite interested how you went in there and you killed a whole bunch of people. And we know what he was doing. He was targeting black people only. He was saying sorry to anybody he pointed that gun to who was white. And that little boy made it into handcuffs. None of them should make it into handcuffs. Not a one of them should make it into handcuffs. Because you get to that point, you lose your rights to live. Period. You didn't like that part. Didn't like how that ended. But that's the facts. And this is what you're causing when you now create a system from courts to schools to economies to racialized communities to lack of access. And you create a system where men of all ethnicities are being raised absent of their fathers. You create a system where young boys will end up in the cemetery before they're old enough to drink alcohol. That's the system you're going to create. And that's the system we have created. And I'm telling you right now, as I close, for real, Generation Z is going to be worse. They're having sex earlier. They're having more babies. They're having more babies out of wedlock. They have less education, less information, less maturity, and much more entitlement. And we're seeding the world with a generation of potentially easily picking to be radicalized young men who do not have the capacity to be men truly in the world. This is the real spiel. This is what I'm talking about today. This is a fact. Ladies, if you're out here and you know that and especially in the black community, 7 out of 10 of you are going to have a baby out of wedlock. Your mind as a woman, as a good woman, should be, I need to make sure this boy's father is involved. And by any means necessary. I'm not going to stop him from being involved because he can't pay. Stop trying to alienate these men, calling them deadbeat dads. Stop it. Because you need more than his money. You need much more than his money. Okay, because I tell you right now, a man who just pays child support and doesn't show up is still a deadbeat. You need his presence more than you need his finances. So you need to say to yourself, I've decided to have a child out of wedlock. You have. 7 out of 10 of you have, historically. And if history is an example of what will take place in the future, it's at least 7 and go 7 out of 10 in the future and more, because they're having sex younger. You have to say to yourself, I have to make sure this father is involved. I don't care what level of father he is. You had sex with him, so it doesn't matter much, right? You already had sex with him. Don't try to evaluate him after you had sex with him. He was man enough to have sex with. Let him be man enough to have access to his child. Because what we are doing is we are producing a generation of murderers. They're either killing people that look like themselves, or they're walking into schools, walking into shopping centers, and killing people that they have decided to hate. Don't let it happen. And women, you have all the power to stop this right now. A lot of you are sitting there and saying, you know what? I got my kid on child support. I got my baby daddy on child support, my ex-husband on child support. He has limited access to his kids. I've been telling Junior that he's a deadbeat for years. I've been telling him, don't be like his daddy. I've been telling him, don't grow up like that miscreant father of yours. But you now, what are you doing? You're radicalizing him right in the house. You're creating an angry little boy who hates his dad. He's going to go out there and anybody that looks like his dad, anybody that sounds like his dad, he's going to lash out at them. Don't do it. I'm telling you, that boy in Texas wasn't created by the access of guns. He wasn't created because he has an unstable mind. He wasn't created because somebody bullied him in high school. He was created because of a lack of access to strong males around him. That's what created him. The lack of access to good men who loved him, who could say, yo, don't do that. From the time he was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. That's what created him. That's what created him. If he's cross-dressing, proof's in the pudding. Lack of men in his life. The proof's in the pudding. Somebody who stop him and say, hey, don't do that, son. Don't do that, son. I don't know what happened to that little boy in Buffalo. I don't know why he decided to drive all that way. I don't know why he decided to read the stuff that he was reading in that manifesto. But somebody should have been around and say, "What the hell are you reading? What is this? Are you stupid? Are you dumb? Do you know the contribution that Black people have done for this country? Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? What are you reading? This is foolishness. This is garbage. This is toilet paper. This shouldn't even be in your mind. You should be ashamed of yourself." You should have stopped him at that point. But nobody was there. No voice of reason was there. Let's change that narrative now. This is the real Spiel. This is Dell Brereton. There's a reason these little boys are becoming killers. It's a lack of men in their lives. Listen to me. I'm Uncle Dell, and I'll tell. Share this with somebody. Send this to a woman who's raising some boys. Send this to a man who's trying to get access to his boys. But share this with somebody. And God bless y'all. Thank you, YouTube.